Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the University of Finley, and welcome to the Findlay Mayoral Forum featuring the candidates from the Republican Party. Hope everybody was able to stay dry. Looks like there was quite a bit of interest in today's forum. So our event is sponsored by the Courier, UFTV, and 1330 WFIN. It's streaming live on the YouTube channel of UFTV and live on WFIN.com and over the air on WFIN as well. I'm WFIN News Director Doug Jenkins. I'll serve as co-moderator for today's event, along with the Courier's Steve Dillon. Our participants this evening are Holly Fishy, Christina Mirren, and Brian Robertson. Let's give them a round of applause. And as I said Tuesday, now that we have that out of the way, we'll ask you to hold your applause until the end. Steve and I have selected the questions for this evening's forum, and the candidates are not aware of what they'll be asked. Our ground rules, we drew numbers at random, and they're seated in the order that they'll answer the questions and get the opening and closing statements. Each candidate will get 2 minutes for their opening statement, as well as for their closing statement. We'll follow the opening with our question and answer session. Each candidate gets 60 seconds to answer, and we can ask a follow-up question to an individual candidate or to the group as a whole, and get 60 seconds for that as well. Candidates also get 60 seconds to give a rebuttal if they're called into question by another of the candidates. Now, we do have a clock in front of them. We'll allow a candidate to finish a thought, but if you take advantage of it, we'll cut you off. So be aware of that. Again, like I said before today's forum, we drew numbers to determine who would give the first opening statement. Brian Robertson drew number 1, and we'll turn the floor over to you, Mr. Robertson.
Good evening, and thank you. Fellow stakeholders, you are interviewing to decide who will be the next CEO of a $100 million operation that we know and love as Flag City USA. As an experienced business professional, I have been blessed to hire people in multiple states and multiple countries. But what I typically want to know about a candidate is what shaped the candidate. Where do they come from? Because I think who they are as a person is separate from their qualifications. For myself, I am the youngest of my parents' 13 children. I grew up low income. But some people would say maybe poor, but we were never poor. We knew God, we knew right from wrong, and certainly we had a daily witness to our parents' work ethic. If I am a candidate for mayor, it is by the grace of God and the parents He gave me. I have been so blessed. But as a private citizen and a county commissioner, I'm committed to 3 simple principles. Really, shouldn't this all be about people and not politics? Shouldn't it really be about ideas and not ideology? And shouldn't it be about results, not rhetoric? So, for example, results like local control of flood mitigation. So we're no longer studying with the Army Corps, but we have a construction project going and benching to be completed this fall. We also have transportation corridors that are being studied and will be modified to keep us moving forward. Additionally, for 10 to 20 years, we studied the need to expand the jail, agreed we needed to expand the jail, but never made the decision to expand it. Those decisions and funding are now in place. And we've also completed strategic planning in the county. Basically, I entered politics to do one thing, to serve the greater good of others by answering God's call. People matter most, not politics. This commitment has included me paying for my own office furniture, my own travel expenses, not taking the health care funded through the county, and I think that reflects the values I have in terms of service for the community. With your continued support, this servant leader mindset is what I'd like to bring to the mayor's office of Findlay, Ohio, Flag City, USA. Thank you.
Ms. Fishy.
I would like to open this evening by thanking WFIN, WKXA, the Courier, and the University of Finley for hosting the 2019 Mayoral Forum. With this opportunity, you will hear directly from all the candidates to make your choice. Last November, I made the decision to run for mayor, filing my petition January 4th. This was not a decision I made lightly. I have been actively involved in our community and the Republican Party for more than 18 years. I have held leadership positions in the many local, state, and national campaigns and have been active in many community organizations, including the Finley Hancock County Crime Prevention Board, the Hancock County Fair Board, and the committee to start the startup of the Citizen Sheriff Academy. I have more than 18 years business experience, including banking, accounting, and medical and property management. I am also licensed to sell life, health, and accident insurance. Presently, I am serving my 3rd term representing the 1st Ward of Finley City Council. And while I am on council, I have used every issue as a learning opportunity. I have gained a strong understanding of our city operations and how the need of each department relates to our annual budget. I've worked to identify the strengths and weaknesses our community has, and I strive to find a positive outcome for each situation. I believe that open communication between government, business, and the people is of paramount importance for our successful community. To meet this need, I established a Facebook page in 2015 to provide the people with many ways to easily access information on what is happening in city government. This connection has gained me the respect and trust of the citizens and allow them to be more involved in our community. This evening, I am thankful for the opportunity to elaborate on issues and share with you how together we can keep Finley clean, safe, and open for business.
All right. Ms. Mirren.
Good evening. I'm Mayor Christina Murn. Thank you again to the Courier, WFIN, WKXA, and the University of Finley for hosting this event this evening, and certainly to each of you for recognizing the importance of the decision that we have coming up in May, and for taking the time to spend the evening learning a little bit more about each of the candidates. I am a Finley native, growing up as the third of 4 daughters to a wonderful mother and a wonderful father and family here in the Finley community. At a young age, my parents were divorced, and later my father passed away at the age of 11 for me. Though that was something that was obviously traumatic and something that I wish on no one, it also was the motivating factor in a lot of my life decisions that led me to where I am today, and that has given me the life experience necessary to recognize the hardship not only in this community, but in your professional lives, in your personal lives, and in your spiritual lives. For the past couple of years, I went to the University of Finley, was paying for my own schooling, was able to live at home, and get degrees in economics and marketing and a minor in finance. Since graduating, I worked at the University of Finley as the Director of Business and Physician Development, where I oversaw new business development, contract negotiations, working with hospital executives and attorneys across the country, as well as recruiting physicians and negotiating their contracts, and managing financial performance and budgets for hospitals, not just millions of dollars, but billions of dollars of revenue. I understand complex financials and contracts and know that I have that experience to be able to bring that to the city. Not just that, but an important factor is the relationships. And I know that with the strong team that we currently have in place and my relationships throughout the community, I'm the leader that we need to continue the success, to build on the foundation and the strong foundation that we've built over the coming years. And with your vote on May 7th, I'll continue as your mayor. Thank you.
All right, the Courier, Steve Dillon, will ask the first 2 questions.
Welcome, candidates, and thank you all for coming. We'll start with the question in the safety services category. Do you believe our current police and fire services are adequate for the needs of the city? Why or why not? What would you do to further fund safety services if you believe we need an increase in manpower or equipment? We'll start with you, Ms. Fishy.
I do not believe that we are meeting the needs of our public safety currently. We have not increased our police and fire complement since the mid-90s. Our city continues to expand. We need to address that staffing number in a smart way that we can sustain. I have a plan that I would like to work with our department heads to implement a 5-year plan to hire fire and police officers in a smart, sustainable way.
Okay, Ms. Murin.
I do believe that we are appropriately staffed. I believe that we have the appropriate individuals to head up those departments, and I believe as mayor, it's my responsibility to support them in their decisions. To this date, they've been managing their departments effectively, both from a manpower standpoint, addressing the community needs, and from a fiscal responsibility. And I believe that if they were to bring up the need for additional resources, we would certainly address that. Safety is obviously of paramount importance, and we don't take it lightly. And I'm proud to say that over the last couple of years, we've been addressing the needs of our community, and we'll continue to address those needs going forward, and we'll work to make adjustments as needed.
Thank you. Mr. Robertson.
From a staffing standpoint, we've had a little bit more of an increase in the fire department than the police department since 2011. So you kind of look at that time span because it's very relevant to what we've seen in terms of crime as well as the increase in structural fires. over the last few years. But I also think that those decisions on staffing are really up to the expertise of both of our chiefs. And certainly we need to make sure that we're supporting that the necessary resources are in place. The most important thing government does is our safety and security, whether that's at the local level or whether that's at the federal level. So with that being understood, I think it's really a matter of making sure we support the recommendations of our chiefs, but at the same time, make sure we look for collaboration efforts like the Matrix Group that is a cross-collaborative effort with our drug enforcement that is made up of both city and county law enforcement, which is another way to use our resources in a collaborative way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question. The city is facing a major expense this year, perhaps as much as more than $10 million, to update its water meters. First, are you convinced that the updates are needed? And second, if they are, how do you believe the project should be financed? Ms. Murin?
So there is some updates that need to be made in our water meters. We've found that some of them have not been appropriately tracking some of the slower flows. And so we're losing some of that revenue as well as not accurately reporting. And so I think it is important that we update that, as well as the transmitters will be going out of service in the coming years. What I have asked the departments to do is to look at how we may be able to update the transmitters on the meters rather than the full units, and to look to roll those out as capital improvements over the next couple of years rather than doing it in one foul swoop. If we determine that it's necessary to update those, we do have strong water and sewer funds, and so we could look at paying some cash or looking at if there is low financing where it makes sense to maintain that cash on hand, then not putting it all at once, but looking at financing opportunities. It is important to make sure we maintain that infrastructure resource, but I think there are a couple of different ways to finance it.
Thank you. Mr. Robertson?
4 years after coming into office in the county, in 2017, we had public meetings to roll out a 20-year financial projection. It had never been done before. We also laid out a 10-year infrastructure projection. It's a good question related to the water and the meter side of things, but the bigger question is, what's the 10-year capital plan across the city? From there, we have to determine what we need to borrow collectively around each of the needs of the various departments as well as our infrastructure. But make no mistake, safety and security is omni-important in terms of local government and national government, but we can't live without good, clean drinking water. So it's a very important piece of infrastructure for our community. And then additionally, there's a conversation, do we borrow or do we not borrow? At the end of 2020, our reserves on hand are going to be $5.1 million. We've had some pretty high reserves, so we need to also be thinking about that total plan relative to our cash flow on hand. If we lose cash stability because of this 7-year economic growth we have in a downturn, we're going to destabilize our workforce, which is not good. We need to make sure we're valuing that long-term job security for our workforce and for the services to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Ms. Fishy?
As chair of Water and Sewer Committee, we have been preparing to address the request of new meters and software. It's my understanding that the Water Department and Engineering will be looking to spend approximately $15 million. Currently, in our reserves, we have $6 million approximately in the water fund and $8 million in the sewer fund. I think it's interesting that Mayor Murin has a different take on how we're going to proceed on this, because we have not had the communication and the discussion on that yet. We are still waiting for those numbers to come in for our committee to review and evaluate and work with the auditor's office to determine if we need to go out for capital debt or if we're able to stage this over a couple years and use the money that we have on hand.
Okay, Ms. Murin, would you like any rebuttal at this point?
Certainly. So obviously, as current mayor, I'm regularly working with our department heads and discussing what issues may be coming down the pike. Obviously, with my background in finance, I wanted to see what are the alternatives to financing and what makes sense from a pro forma standpoint. If we're missing out on revenue because of slow flow, then we need to determine how much revenue is going to be gained if we do update the meters. The meters may end up ultimately paying for themselves. So I think that's an important question to look at.
Okay. Holly, would you
Can I
like to
come back
follow
on
up?
that
Yes.
one? So part of this discussion that we need to have that we haven't had yet is looking at the formula to determine if we need to increase our water rates to cover this cost over a 3 or 5 year process. But going out for debt is not an easy thing to do. It is very complex, and it needs the experience of the auditor's office. It needs the water and sewer committee to be the representatives for city council to make sure we have open dialogue and communication so you as the citizen know what it's going to cost us. We're looking at an average of potentially $750 per meter. The meters are currently on a 2 megahertz wave that will be going obsolete. It could be this year, it could be next year. The software problem that we're experiencing is something that we've been trying to address with our computer services and the company we've contracted with, and we're not finding resolve there. So that's why we are looking at increasing or changing the software as well.
Okay, thank you very much. The next questions will be from Doug.
The city administrators obviously don't punch a time clock, but there has been some concern that office hours have become a bit too flexible. Do you believe that administrator positions, including that of the mayor, are a full-time position? And how would you have to adjust your current life to accommodate being the mayor? Mr. Robertson, we start with you.
Well, as county commissioner, it has been a full-time responsibility. My wife, who is an HR professional, pulled me aside after the first quarter and said, "You're averaging 74 hours in office at the county commissioner's office after the first quarter." So you get into it, and out of it what you put into it. So yes, it's a big commitment. With me, it's meant sacrificing some growth in my businesses, but at the same time, if you go where God calls you, He will bless you tenfold, and I believe that. Related to the 3 administrative positions, whether it's a tax, whether it's a service director or the safety director, they've got to be held to a similar standard. There's no doubt about that. And at the same time, we're sitting here today having a conversation between a person who is currently appointed and a person who has been in office for 5 years, and they don't have the answers on the water meters because we haven't had a meeting. So we've got to have more of a business-like approach and more of an operational approach versus a political approach or discussion around the issues we're facing as a community.
Ms. Fishy.
As mayor, I would make this a full-time job. I actually have ended my current position of working to make this a full-time effort to get the election appointment for mayor for the next 4 years. My previous work experience, I was very dedicated. I'm used to working 24/7, 365, whatever it needs to get the job done. I have the support of my husband and my wife, or my kids and my parents to make sure that I have the extra support I need to make sure that I can make the city of Finley a full-time priority.
Ms. Murren.
Ultimately, what counts are results, and certainly this will be my full-time position, and I'm excited to be currently serving and to continue to serve. It certainly does take a village, and I have a wonderful, supportive husband and family within the community, and at this stage in life, I don't have children, but that just means that every single citizen can be my child, and I'm happy to give you all the love and attention you need. But I think that we have a very strong administration, a team that works diligently every day to serve this community, and if there's a problem, we'll discuss it.
I do have one follow-up question for Mr. Robertson. We'll open it to the floor if need be. You did talk a little bit about sacrifice to your personal business interests as being an elected official. Can you outline that just a little bit?
Well, yes. For me, in terms of opening plants in additional states outside of Ohio, I've had to walk away from some opportunities there. But I really think that what built our community, in terms of our local community, and what built this country was for 100 years or more, private sector people left their businesses, left their farms to serve for a term or two and leave it better than they found it. We get into a mindset of career politicians, and over the last 40 years, career politicians haven't bettered America. They've bettered the wealth of politicians, but they haven't bettered our middle class, and they haven't bettered the everyday lives of people. And we need to get back to that servant leader mindset locally and nationally. Thank you.
Eddie, if you'd like to respond, we'll give you 60 seconds each.
I'm good.
Certainly, I think that it is important to have folks that have the business experience, and as the only candidate that's coming directly from full-time employment in the private sector, I believe I bring that, and I recognize, and my business was very supportive in me taking this position. They know that I'm the right person for the job, and I believe that it is important that we have folks that get in and are here to do the job at hand, and certainly I'm excited to be serving, and I'm early in life, so I'm sure this won't be my last job.
Okay.
Just a clarification, the only candidate that's coming from a full-time job or a private sector setting?
Just-
All right,
clarify
hang on.
that.
You're not
Yeah.
allowed to question each
Okay.
other. So
I'm just asking.
we'll leave it there and move on to the next question. And again, I'm sure you can check with all of the candidates after tonight and on their social media platforms for further rebuttal on some of these issues. Let's get to our next question, though. Findlay's previous mayor regularly traveled on city business to Washington, D.C. and other places, and also held memberships in an association with state and national mayors. How would you approach travel and networking if elected? We start with you, Ms. Fishy.
How would you say the last sentence?
How would you approach travel and networking if elected?
So if elected as mayor, I will do whatever it takes to make sure Finley is put first. And if that means that we have to go to Washington or Columbus to work with state and national elected officials to get things done here in community, I'm definitely ready to do that. I'm not looking at using the city budget for travel for a stepping stone or for my own benefit. Finley is my home. Running for the mayor position is something that I want to give back, and I don't see myself using the city budget for travel for my own pleasure.
Ms. Murren.
I think it's very important that the mayor continue to raise Finley to both the county, state, national, and international level. The mayor's office is a representative of our community to go and share the vision and what we have to offer to businesses throughout the world. So I think that's very important. I think that it's something that needs to be budgeted and agreed upon and approved by council, and I think that that's then where those funds are come from. So I think that it's certainly an important part of business development for our community and is important to also have proper oversight as well.
Mr. Robertson.
The pin I have on my jacket today is for legatus, which means I'm a legate. A legate is Latin for ambassador. So I certainly want to be an ambassador for our community. But that ambassadorship doesn't extend to further my political career. It certainly extends to serving this community. I am a candidate that traveled to the Miami Conservancy District to benchmark flood mitigation before I came into office. I've traveled to Buffalo. I've traveled with multiple trips to D.C., Japan for economic development to be an ambassador for the community. I've done that in a sense paying for my own travel expenses. I think that mindset's important. And again, it's not what you're going to do. It's what have you done? What have your actions shown to the people you've served and the people that have voted for you? The main thing we have to understand in terms of dialogue is going to be between us and the state. We have realized that we're too small of a fish to get federal funding, but now we're getting state funding relative to flood mitigation. So we need an ambassador in Columbus that's actually invested millions of dollars to build business in Northwest Ohio, and I think that's going to be a strong voice for continued funding on flood mitigation. Thank you.
Okay, Steve Dillon will ask the next two questions, and then we'll take a 2-minute break.
Okay, the next question. Last week, the city, actually the region, got some fabulous news that a developer has plans to invest $31 million in downtown Finley to build on the former Argyle site. If the city sells the parking lot behind the property to the Port Authority first, what concerns do you have about this project, if any? Ms. Murin?
Certainly, anytime a large project or any project comes into the city, we have to do appropriate due diligence. That means making sure that the benefit to the community as a whole is positive. So I think that we need to make sure that as council reviews the process and determines if this is something that they're interested in selling the city parking lot, that we need to consider all the different facets. My concerns would be making sure that we hold the developer accountable, and we can do that through either the auction process or the Port Authority by having appropriate contingencies built into the agreement. So I think that council will do their appropriate due diligence, and I'm happy to support what's appropriate to move the community forward and to be welcoming to such a large investment.
Thank you. Mr. Robertson?
I think we have to approach this project cautiously optimistic. Certainly it could be a great investment for our downtown. It's certainly going to come with some challenges in terms of the loss of that parking, especially for the 1 year during the construction period. But we also have to make sure that before we start moving and allocating transfer of property, that the investor has the appropriate funding in place. Just as a point of reference, you may remember the Riverfront Project that was going to be between the river and the University of Finley, a $50 million project with a gentleman coming out of Kentucky. So we had that episode where we thought somebody was going to do an investment. So that due diligence, and of course this is a local individual, which is a fantastic thing, but the due diligence to get from an idea and a concept to a $31 million project is going to be a process, and I would urge patience on that process. And I think Grant Russell made a good point the other night that we shouldn't be transitioning that parking lot until we know that there's an actual project that's going to take place.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's fabulous that we're looking at a 122-unit housing facility in our downtown. I think that's great for our community. But as far as city council goes, and what we need to look at is the city-owned property of the parking lot. That parking lot provides parking, open parking, parking to the county, and then there's reserve parking. We have approximately $13,000 a year in revenue we get from that parking lot that subsidizes our parking attendant. For those that didn't know, we haven't had a parking attendant for almost 4 months. So putting that into play, plus losing parking, plus losing that revenue, will we be having to subsidize our parking authority if we sell this parking lot? I believe if we make the decision to sell the parking lot, it needs to be done through auction. I don't think we should sidestep it through the Toledo Port or the Blanchard River Port Authority. I think we need to follow the same process as we do for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Allowing certain businesses and some individuals to delay tax payments has been a city practice now for about 10 years. On Tuesday, some of the at-large candidates indicated it might be time to end this practice because the city is in a better financial situation today than it was a decade ago. Where do you stand on this issue, Mr. Robertson?
Certainly this has been a tremendous topic of discussion, and we have to understand that this practice started in 2009 during the recession because it created a cash flow issue when certainly a refund had to be provided back to the employer. With that being said, I think we need to look at this in a simpler light. It's become a very emotional issue, but it should be a transparent process. So my thought process would be to basically notify those that are participating in the program that at this particular date, it is going to become transparent. We've appreciated you participating in the program. It's added value to the cash flow and the stability of the budget, but effective this date, it is going to become transparent. It shouldn't be anything anybody should feel bad about participating in if it is a necessary cash flow issue in terms of the amount of taxes they are paying. With that, they can choose to participate or not participate. But we shouldn't create an administrative thing where we're going to have applicants and create more government to try to administer everybody applying to it. Let's think simple, let's think efficient, let's think smart.
Thank you. Ms. Fishy?
Tax deferrals is not an emotional issue. It's a fairness issue. And currently, we are not treating everybody fairly. We have some who pay their taxes on time, pay them quarterly, and if they don't pay them quarterly, they receive a penalty. In 2012, the process from 2009 started being used. And we are up to approximately 52 businesses and 2 individuals that are being deferred in our community to the tune of $2.5 to $3 million. This came to my attention when I joined City Council. We were not getting a full financial picture. If we are going to continue this process, we are the only one in the state of Ohio that is doing it. The state auditor agrees that we need to have a policy in place and an application process, or we need to end the deferral. I am open for both discussions, but we need to resolve this issue. It's gone on long enough.
Thank you. Ms. Murin?
This is certainly an important topic, and I think we as the administration have failed the community in effectively communicating what it is and why we utilize it. It's an important method and tool for the business community and for the city to maintain and control our cash flow more effectively. And I think I agree with Ms. Fishy that we need to be more transparent to help folks understand it. At the last income tax board, prior to me taking office, it was proposed that we implement a policy which has been reviewed by our external auditors, and it was not approved at that meeting. So I will be going back to that group and making sure that we implement a process to be more transparent in sharing what we look at to determine who can utilize this system. It's important that we have it as a resource. And one of the reasons that many citizens don't qualify or why we don't reach out to them to utilize it is because they have consistent withholdings. You don't have the variable income that is what causes this issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Any rebuttals here? Okay.
I would like to
You do?
just elaborate on that. The tax deferral process is not to be in place to control our cash flow. City Council has a responsibility to make sure we are doing our job properly. We don't need a separate step telling us how to hold our money back. And as far as the external auditors go, they have no skin in the game. They do not determine our policies. Our income tax board determines our policies, and you can refer it out and ask for permission, but they will not weigh in and tell us how to run our city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll pause for 2 minutes. You're watching the 2019 GOP Primary Mayoral Forum on UFTV, listening live on 1330 WFIN. We're back in 2 minutes. Primary forum with the GOP candidates running for mayor in Finley. WFIN News Director Doug Jenkins and the Courier Steve Dillon asking questions. We'll continue with the second half of our forum. Then right around 5:50 is when we'll get into our closing statements for this afternoon. Well, we addressed this topic on Tuesday with City Council candidates, and we'll talk about it with you as well. More often than not, in terms of when it comes to new development downtown Findlay, such as the proposed $31 million project across from Marathon, those projects can be greeted with apprehension or even outright derision sometimes from city residents, especially in the realm of social media. So how do you balance community concerns with the need for potential development in the city? I believe we start with Ms. Fishy here.
How do we battle concerns? You're going in
Balance the concerns between the residents and the need for continued development in the city.
for the downtown project.
Or for any project.
So if we're addressing the housing issue and the housing shortage we are facing in business development, there's two aspects. We need to be thoughtful and intentional of where we are placing housing developments in the community. And if it's near an existing neighborhood, we need to listen to their input and see if we can find give and take when we need to. When we're looking at business development, I believe we need to diversify what we are attracting to our community and look for new opportunity and new areas to attract business to our community.
Ms. Marin.
I think it's very important that we listen to our constituents when we're looking at potential projects. And certainly with social media, we can get a lot of feedback very quickly. So what I would really like to do and improve upon, and with my background in marketing, I'm really passionate about this, is communication. We need to be able to get information out more effectively and efficiently to folks so they don't feel like they're suddenly blindsided with an issue. Obviously, things happen very quickly, and so that can be challenging. But I think getting out, building that relationship, having methods to communicate with everyone, and being consistent in our message and how we get that out so folks know where to look is very important. But certainly it's important that we hear their concerns, that we talk about them, that we address them and work through those problems and take that into feedback. I know with the St. Michael's project, that was a key issue where folks were upset and we were able to get their feedback, take it back to the developer and adjust the plan.
Mr. Robertson.
Just to clarify, were you looking for specifically downtown in the question or in general?
Any development, we've had the proposed apartments on the north side of the city, north of Bernard Avenue, that have created some controversy, like the St. Michael's. Any development.
Okay. Well, there's a couple of conversations that have been taking place in our community in terms of the amount of housing, affordable housing, and I try to have a different conversation with voters and friends and neighbors, which is we need to talk about available housing. And what we have to recognize is that over the last 10 years, most of the housing developments have taken place outside the city limits. That means most of that income is happening outside of the city limits, which therefore is going to drive down our income tax. But the most growth we've seen in terms of developments, in terms of dwellings and roofs overhead, have been apartments or subsidized housing. So from a land use standpoint and a long-range planning standpoint, we've done a study in the past. We need to get that study out and look at how we're going to better utilize property in terms of development. And then specifically, we have a great opportunity. If you look at the buildings that have been cleared along the riverfront and downtown, you look at the Dornay buildings that were once going to be torn down and saved, we have an opportunity to say, what's the vision of our downtown look like in terms of along the riverfront, in terms of park, green space. And again, that's about having a collaborative conversation. Thank you.
The city's been involved in funding workplace development programs such as the Raise the Bar initiative. Do you believe that this is a good investment of taxpayer dollars, and why or why not? Ms. Marin, we'll start with you.
I think it's a very important topic. Obviously, if you don't have individuals that are appropriately skilled and educated to fill the jobs that we have available, you're going to lose businesses, as well as you're going to have folks in our community that are unemployed. So I think making sure that we're focusing on education at all levels and equipping folks through programs with upskilling as well as K-12 and harnessing the relationships with our local community college and the University of Finley is certainly important. I think you always have to weigh spending taxpayer dollars and get their feedback, but I certainly think that that's a worthy cause and an area that we should continue to invest.
Mr. Robertson.
Well, as someone that started out on the front lines of a workforce, working third shift in a factory, finishing high school, I can tell you that I have been blessed to be mentored and have workforce development. I think in terms of Raise the Bar, it's something the county has invested in. We have funded. Certainly we had a little lag in being able to fund for a year that we made that up. But we have to do something that's different than what everybody else is doing. Other communities are complaining. We're coming together and taking action. And I think that's most important. I'm in a unique position in the fact that I'm also a job creator in the community. So I understand those challenges firsthand and understand that today when you hire an employee, the level of skill, the level of commitment, the sense of responsibility in terms of attendance, those are skills that we have to teach coming into the workforce. 15, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, people came into the workforce with what we call those soft skills. So I think the collaboration around that in terms of our workforce development, the collaboration with our community business partners are important, but I also think we got to get into a conversation about economic development and what that looks like in the future.
Ms. Fishy.
So Raise the Bar is a vessel that is helping us to build on our job plan going forward in our community. It has caused us as the city to even think outside the box. We have developed this year that we're working on internship programs with our students to show that there's opportunity in city government to have a good paying job and stay right here in Findlay, Ohio. The workforce development aspect is extremely important, and we have to work with the schools, economic development, and the business and private sector to make sure we're addressing everybody's needs. We, as a community, our development has not changed in the last 30 years. So we're addressing some issues with low-paying jobs, and I think we need to diversify our plan to look at other opportunities to bring higher-paying jobs into our community.
Okay, Steve Dillon has the next two questions.
Better transparency is always an easy promise to make during a campaign. How would you actually make city government more visible to taxpayers? We'll start with you, Mr. Robertson.
Well, I think in terms of what people are feeling and sensing is that, in terms of the speed of city government, and of course I deal in county government as well, and we've got a lot of things going on, but the emergency readings. So my sense is when you have a lot of emergency readings, there are times when stuff has to get done, right? Things happen, things come through, they have to be signed, they have to be authorized, you have to get it in the record. But when there's a constant sense that you're having to have emergency readings, I don't believe that crisis management should be the daily mode of operation. In business, we have to have crisis management every then. But a good leader is going to look towards prevention management. How do we not put our employees, our department heads, and our community in a situation where they say, we've got to make this decision right now? And then we don't have the honest and open dialogue. We don't have the debate. We need to have debate. We need to have discussion. We just can't have divisiveness. And trust me, I've said in this room there were 200-something people screaming about flood mitigation on both sides of this aisle right here. But look how much progress we can make through honest, open discussion, and even at sometimes disagreements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fishy?
Transparency and communication has been a major concern to all citizens in the community. Going door to door and talking with folks, they feel that they don't have a voice. They feel that they don't know what's happening in our city government. When they see emergency legislation being passed through quickly and there not being a lot of open discussion and communication going on, they feel that they're missing a piece of the pie, and then that builds distrust. Since I've been on city council, I have built transparency and communication with myself and the citizens. My social media page, reaching out, answering phone calls, has built some trust within the community. And you have to be able to answer everybody's question or concern and be able to listen in order to move the city forward.
Thank you. Ms. Murin?
Well, I have a question for everyone in the crowd. How many of you have gone on and looked at the open checkbook on the city's website? Raise your hand. And that's where I would start. Half of those people were city government officials. We have a lot of resources on our city website out in the community that people are not aware of, and we need to educate everyone. We need to take advantage of social media, we need to take advantage of the newspaper and try to hit each demographic where they're at. And the way we need to communicate is by being preemptive. People don't trust you when they see something 3 days later, and it's certainly a challenge. We all are doing a lot of different things, and the government's no different. And so it's important that we get that information out there, we harness social media, we build a relationship better with regular updates within the newspaper and media. So I'll encourage people to buy the newspaper. Is that a plug? All right, perfect. But I think there's a lot of avenues that we need to take advantage of.
Okay, thank you. The next question. At some point or the other during the campaigns, I've heard each of you say you want to help fight the drug problems that the community is having, the nation's having. What can you say tonight specifically that you can do to help fight the opioid epidemic in this area? We'll start with you, Ms. Fishy.
So the opiate epidemic in our community, we need to strengthen the communication with all of our agencies and be creative in finding new solutions. Finley and Hancock County needs to have an active role in prevention. We are addressing an overcrowding of a jail, which needs to be addressed, but it's not meant to be our detox facility. We need to start reaching the children at a younger age and teaching that prevention factors, and so we don't have the increase in the drug problem. I have been on the Crime Prevention Board. I've been active with churches and other vessels in our community that are working hands-on with those that are recovering from addiction or figuring out how they can fit back into the community. So we need to do that, but we need to focus on prevention to get us moving forward outside of the box.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Buren?
Thing number one I would do is raise awareness of the 411 resource line. We have so many resources in our community, especially for a community our size. We have a very strong ADAMIS board, and as I was working in the healthcare community, I was specifically working to combat the opioid crisis. And when I would be meeting with hospital executives, one of the first things I would say is, we would like to sit down and meet with your ADAMIS board and tell them about what pain management group does. And very many times they would say, oh, I don't even think we have an ADAMIS board. And so we need to harness that active organization that is well-funded and understands the intricacies of education, prevention, treatment, recovery, and long-term support. It's an issue that is not solved alone. We need to engage more effectively our churches. Celebrate Recovery is very active at my church, and we've seen a great increase in individuals being successful in their recovery when they not only have the emotional and physical support, but also the spiritual support.
Thank you. Mr. Robertson?
Well, in terms of what's been going on, we have a community corrections board that meets quarterly. That's something in terms of the candidates that are here, and especially someone who's been in office for 5 years. I've not seen them at these meetings, but that's where the daily, weekly, and monthly work comes together between city, county, our healthcare, our mental health, our addiction groups, and we look at how we're tracking towards the projects and initiatives that we're doing that really are unique as a community, because I think we're doing some things that are leading edge in terms of battling addiction. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you're battling addiction, we can't gel mental health and addiction issues. But in some cases, we need to be able to have the space to detain them. We, both city and county, are now using the Tyler software. Part of the advantage of that Tyler software is that in the jail, we have healthcare, we have nurses, we have staffing to help treat these individuals. But it also gets them on a path to programming quicker because of that technology between those arrested, between the city and or the county. And so that's an important perspective, that we're getting them to the necessary treatment or programming that's going to work for them. And believe me, we will go through multiple levels of programming to find the right fit for individuals. It's usually a 6 or 7 attempt before somebody gets to recovery.
30-second rebuttal.
I would just like to rebut Brian. With my 5 years experience on city council, I have been active in the community correction board. I've been attending those meetings and meeting with the sheriff and meeting with our police staff periodically. And I'd like to echo Ms. Buren when she said that we need to have church involved. In order for us to fix this problem, we need to have God, we need to have family, and we need to be working together.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have time for one more question before we get to our closing statements. The city has been able to deficit spend the past couple of years to help pay for capital improvement projects like road work because there's a large cash balance on hand right now. What are your thoughts on the practice and when it should be used? We start with you, Ms. Marin.
Well, certainly it's always important to have an emergency fund. My husband and I practice wise financial stewardship, and I'm sure many of you have used Dave Ramsey. So I'm a big proponent of utilizing that method, but it's also important that we're not holding too much of our constituents' money, that we're reinvesting it. They're not giving it to us to hold on to it for safekeeping. They're giving it to us to invest in their community and make sure they're receiving the resources that they deserve. So I think continuing to invest in our infrastructure and look at ways that we can harness those dollars to make sure that everyone feels that they are being seen and that they're receiving those benefits. I think there's a lot that we can do really on communication around that as well, is with streets. I know West Park consistently asks why their streets aren't being updated, and so I've been speaking with some constituents this week on when different projects are going to be rolled out into their neighborhoods, and with additional funding we can also look at doing other development projects within the communities that everyone can benefit from.
Mr. Robertson.
Well, the overall debt of the city has come down quite a bit, down around $15 million based on the latest information I was able to get to online. But with that being said, we've got to be cautious anytime with deficit spending. I would certainly agree with Mayor Murren that we need to be putting that money to work, whether it's on the capital side, certainly on the services side, so we're making sure that we're doing the best to meet the demands and the needs of our everyday citizens. But we also have pockets of citizens like West Park that are very frustrated that their issues haven't been addressed. So we have to balance that out. And it goes back to something I said 40 minutes ago. We have to understand what is our 10-year capital plan, whether that's on the water pollution control side, on the sewer side, whether it's on the water side, whether that's on the infrastructure and resources around our safety and security forces. We have to understand and have a vision for that plan. Putting a plan out there will be criticized. I was criticized in 2017, but leadership is putting stuff out there so that other people can critique it, give you your feedback, you listen, and you make it better. Thank you.
Ms. Fishy.
Planning. Everybody has to plan. You plan in your personal lives, you plan in your work life, we plan for the future. As far as planning goes, and being on City Council for 5 years, I'm proud to say that working with Paul Smeltzer, our Safety Service Director at the time, we have implemented a 5-year capital plan. It allows us to look to the future, it allows us to plan, and allows us to communicate with the citizens where we are improving our infrastructure next and why. We're in a position now where we are able to have a carry-forward balance. With that carry-forward balance, we're able to leverage our dollars to get more done in our community to benefit you. That's the same type of thing we need to look at when we're looking at police and fire staffing. Security is just as important as infrastructure, and that's why I want to work on putting a 5-year plan there as well.
Just rebuttal.
We'll allow for a quick rebuttal, yes.
So you've been in office for 5 years. Why haven't you not made a plan?
Well,
for
you
our
can't.
citizens? Oh, I'm sorry.
Can't ask a question.
My rebuttal would be, Ms. Fishy has been in office for 5 years. Obviously, I'm a business person. I want to get right to it. Has been in office for 5 years, but the things that she's talking about, why haven't they been done in the last 5 years? All right. It's about not rhetoric, but results.
All right, we'll allow for a quick rebuttal, and then we'll get to closing statements.
So being financially responsible in our position and working with elected officials and the administration, we have put together the 5-year plan for the Capitol. Being a good steward of our funding, not looking at having to do what our commissioner has done to raise taxes when the people said no, or allowing Gibbs Trash Service to rack up a bill of $100,000 before taking a stance. We are doing a lot in our community. We are addressing our dollars. We are being smart, and putting a 5-year plan in for bringing back police and fire is a must. And we were getting back out of having to do layoffs in 2012.
All right, so by rule, we have to allow for a rebuttal, but we do need to get to closing statements. So I'm starting to feel like a judge. I'm going to ask you to limit your scope to
I'll be
talking
brief.
about the tax.
So 2 things. First of all, there was not a tax raise. There was a tax that was put in place to fund a jail. Ms. Fishy has said several times, we need to expand the jail. She agrees with that, but yet she wants to criticize the fact that it's getting funded. So this is the mentality that she has had on City Council. Let me complain about everything, but where's the resolution? Where's the result to fix the problem? So you have to make tough decisions. We've got drugs coming across our border into this country, and we've got drug dealers coming into our community. So you can't say you want the jail and you want more police and then say you don't want to fund it. So would you rather fund it with property tax? Would you rather fund it with income tax? Or would you rather fund it with a sales tax where 52% of that money is generated outside of our community? And every business has a line of credit, by the way. You have a line of credit on a credit card. We have $5.5 million coming into that landfill. And we're talking about a $100,000 accounts receivable issue where the county filed suit, which this is a lawsuit, back in December. So I think we're managing the business, and I think the prosecutor's office will get that resolved for us. Thank you.
All right, this is where I have to play traffic cop. I'm sure they'll have more to say on their social media feeds after tonight's forum, and we'll look forward to seeing that there. But we do have to get to closing statements. And again, we'll go in reverse order of the opening statements. Ms. Marin, the floor is yours. You have 2 minutes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I think this evening was very enlightening. I think you can see that we have 3 distinctly different candidates, each of us bringing a unique background. And I believe that this evening, and hopefully as you continue to do additional research, you'll see that I'm the correct candidate. We've built a strong foundation over the last couple of years, but we've been allowing the disrespect and insufficient communication to direct our community rather than the voice of the people and common sense. And I know that I can bring that to this community. I'm excited to be serving currently. We have a strong team, and I know each of them are very supportive and passionate about Finley moving forward. And I know that by addressing our affordable housing issues, by continuing to invest in infrastructure, by managing our finances sufficiently, by taking the opioid crisis head on, that we'll be able to continue to have a community that is the envy of the nation, that's the #1 micropolitan, that attracts business investment. I know that with my background in contracts, financial management, and marketing and communication, that I'm well suited for this position, and I look forward to having your vote in the upcoming months, and make sure to tell your friends as well.
Ms. Fishy.
Well, thank you, Doug and Steve, for mediating this debate this evening. Tonight we discussed many issues of importance to our community. I believe by working as a team together with other elected officials, business leaders, and citizens, we can develop a strong blueprint to keep Finley moving forward. As mayor, I will listen to you, and I dedicate my years of business experience and city government experience to solve the issues we talked about this evening. I fully support diversified economic development efforts that allow us to increase our tax base but not our tax rate. I also see safety and security as our top priority, which I will work with the rest of the elected officials to implement a 5-year plan to increase staffing in a smart and sustainable way. I believe that all taxpayers should be treated equally, which is why I've been on the forefront of resolving the issue of tax deferrals. We must either end the practice entirely or create a clear policy that spells out the criteria we required to apply. I am a true conservative who believes that all lives matter. I stand for transparency and open communication with all facets of our community. And I am prepared to work and ready to lead, and I ask for your vote May 7th.
Mr. Robertson.
Well, I want to stress that the mayor's office should really be about the God-given talents of the employees, the department heads, and all the elected officials, whether that's proclamations or whether that's engagement in terms of the decisions that are being made. I think too many times as a community, we don't focus on all the other parts in terms of the components that make up the results and services we see. So I think that's just my mindset, that's my heart. And then additionally, I'm asking for your support on May 7th, and here's why. You walk into a $100 million company, maybe it's Ball Metal, maybe it's a new Autoliv plant, maybe it's a division of Marathon, but you look around and you see employees with 20 to 40 years of experience. And you see 3 candidates, and one's got some entry-level experience, one's got some bouncing around experience, and one's got a 30-year track record of starting at the bottom, going through the process of working their way up, and learning the ropes along the way. When you look around in that situation, which candidate actually gets an interview to run a $100 million company out of the 3 candidates on the stage if we're in the private sector? I think we all know the answer to that. But this is politics. This isn't the private sector. In the real world, the most qualified person is most likely going to get that position. So, from my standpoint, I'd like to say what I say to all of our employees when they say have a friend that we want you to hire, Brian. I say, will you trust that friend with your paycheck? And if they say, well, I want you to hire him, but I wouldn't trust him with my paycheck, well, then that's not a good referral, right? I want you to know you can trust me with your paycheck. I heard you. You said you didn't want to see a tax increase. We didn't increase taxes. All right, but we also have had a consensus over a period of time that the numbers are right. It makes more cost sense to expand the jail, and it's in the best interest of our safety and security of our community. And we need a leader who's going to look at it from the standpoint of it's not about the power, it's not about the politics, because we've got to take those decisions and make it about the performance of the community. And the more we collaborate between the city and the county, the better it is for taxpayers. And I think I'll be a bridge for that. Thank you.
Okay, that'll bring us to the end of tonight's forum. We want to thank you for joining us tonight. We'd also like to thank our candidates for participating. Just a few more thank yous and we'll be on our way. I do want to thank the Courier for their coverage in print, UFTV for televising the forum, and again, you can watch it on YouTube following tonight's forum, and also WFIN at 1330 and 95.5 FM for live radio coverage. Remember, early voting is underway. Election Day is May 7th. For Steve Dillon, I'm Doug Jenkins, wishing you a good night from the University of Findlay.